Welcome to another video from Lessons in Logic. This video is a remake of one I put out about a month ago talking about why simulators are not to be trusted as they don't accurately reflect how a game has played out. This video was removed by YouTube as they had a complaint from Ben Michaels from Sports Trading Live that it was in breach of copyright. I'm not going to fight this. If I have breached YouTube's conditions, the video deserves to have been taken down. I'm not convinced of his reason for lodging the complaint, especially when he's just released a new version of his simulator. Evidently you can trade on correct score, first half goals and match odds, all for $3.99 or $5.99 for the super package. The overs market still only goes up to 6.5 though. Would be interesting to hear Ben's thoughts on how he'd test out Spurs 3, Liverpool 6 from December. I can do it. I believe he's tried to silence me because I've just shown you can do all of this for free. It's ironic that a video showing something I've created myself gets removed for copyright issues. Well, thanks Ben, I appreciate the motivational kick up the backside you've given me. I've now developed my own app even more, which I'll demonstrate how you can do all this and more for free if you have the skills. If you would like to purchase CGM Bet, you can now do so from our own link. This will get you 25% off the current price. Just go to the link on the screen and also in the description of this video to make your purchase and join many other users of this excellent betting and trading tool. So in this video we'll discuss, without showing any simulator, how there are discrepancies between simulated and real odds. We'll also talk about the limitations of simulators and how they use stale data. Then we'll get into the fun part of the video and we'll show you how our application has come on further since the original video, and then we'll show you a couple of wow features that no simulator can do. For reference, when I'm looking at comparison data between simulators and real odds, we've used the Trading in the Market simulator, which is a free resource on their website. Although I am highlighting the limitations of simulators, I would recommend anyone who is tempted to try them out to use this one. It is pretty slick and it is free. Nobody can knock it too much. All simulators are similar, and my overall comments regarding simulators are a generalisation and not specific to the one I've used today. Anyone can sign up and use it, so no copyright issues here. In order to find the right game to compare odds with, we've made a note of the final score and goals times for the game and use CGM Bet to cross-reference the game in order to find the data. Once we have this, we can access the actual Betfair exchange odds for the game. We plotted the minute-by-minute times for both Tottenham away at Nottingham Forest on August the 28th, 2022 and the over 2.5 goals in the same game. Note the date. Simulators aren't capable of using recent games, another downside of them. Would you be confident in using a game that was 2.5 years old to test out the odds for your new strategy? Probably not. So as you can see from the charts, the simulator odds are quite a way out for Tottenham's odds against the exchange. The goals in this game came at 5 and 81 minutes for a 2-0 win for Spurs. CGM Bet, the simulator and Betfair odds movement all agree with these goal times. We can see that Spurs were drifting before the first goal came, whereas the simulator had the odds being fairly static around the 1.48 point. We can also see that the simulator puts a greater emphasis on the first Spurs goal, dropping the odds down to 1.12. When in reality the real odds were 1.23. At these small numbers, that is a huge difference. We can see that this difference is continued throughout the game before coming closer together around the 61st minute. At this point, sometimes the simulator had higher odds than the exchange and at other times it was lower. There is no pattern, demonstrating how simulators have no ability to read how the actual game went. It is also worth noting the simulator stops dead on 45 minutes. There is no injury time, although it does add some time on at the end of the game. It is always the same amount. What we can see is that the live odds jump around at half time, so there is an opportunity for scalping. You can't see this in the simulator. Although it isn't clear from the graph due to the numbers being the same, the actual game goes on for 2 minutes longer than the simulator does. Another inaccuracy. Moving on to the 2.5 goals market, we can see the graphs are closer together here, as you would expect typically with smaller numbers. As the game draws to a close, we can see the gaps appearing. We can see that the Betfair odds are getting higher at a steeper rate than the simulator. The real odds drop to 2.86 with the simulator at 2.38. The simulator then goes on a steep upward curve, whereas the real odds are more settled, before going off the chart 5 minutes into injury time. So in order to get the real odds for this game, we need to make use of Betfair's historical data. This is available from the Betfair site, and the link is in the description below. Before we look at this, we need to highlight the terms and conditions of using this data. So the resale or distribution to or the use of historical data by another organisation or individual is strictly prohibited unless a specific agreement is in writing with Betfair exists. Our application does not store any Betfair data. It purely displays it all from a text file, which is up to the individual to download any data that they require from this Betfair site using their own account. And also as well, we've got all historical data is provided for personal internal use only. If you'd like to use the information for commercial purposes, then you'll require a commercial license. So I won't be selling this app for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it would cost me £500 for a commercial license, and secondly, I have no intention of supporting this application further than providing the functionality that I need myself. So it's more of a hobby project for me, as I'm not going to be providing any data with this. I mean, if you remember, all the data in the simulators is hard coded in there, so they do actually ship with data, but this is just a shell which you can make use of Betfair data from your own account. We are not breaking any of the Betfair terms and conditions with this application, which is something that I was keen to avoid doing as I was building the application. So now that disclaimer is out of the way, we will continue. So what we'll use is the Betfair basic plan, which is giving us free data, and this is at 1 minute intervals. So we're going to get an update of the odds every single minute. I mean, if you want to pay, then you can get every second or every tick. But this is a monthly fee, so it gets quite expensive. And it's worth saying that our application will actually work with any of these models, but only for the soccer at the moment. We haven't developed anything for the other sports because, as I say, it was developed for my own personal use, and I'm not intending going into these markets in any great detail. So in order to get your files, what you need to do is you need to purchase the data, which is going to be free, as we can see here. So we go for the basic plan, and we select soccer, and then we select what month we want. So we could have an entire season's worth. These files get quite large, so I would recommend just keeping it to the small subset that you're interested in at that moment in time. So what this would do is this would get all of the football data for December 2024, and we'd just click on purchase, and then that would add that to your Betfair historical data account. So if you go to my data, then we can see all of the data here which we've purchased for free, and we can see here we've got quite a lot, so if you've got even more down there. As we've established, the West Ham versus Manchester City game was actually played on the 10th of August 2019, which we've got here. So we've got August 2019. This is where we can download the entire file, which will be 356 megabytes. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that because that is going to take a while, and there's 180,000 files in there. So what we will do is we will take it just from the 10th of August, which is when we know the game was played, and we'll just select the GB data, like so. So it's 3,150. So that's now 7 megs we're down to here. We'll add that to downloads, and we'll download that. And it downloads it as a compressed archive. So we'll save that. While that's downloading, you will need something like WinZip or 7-zip in order to extract these files. Just using the built-in Windows uncompressed files I don't think works. So what I've done is created a new folder structure on my PC called BF Data, and I've created a subfolder called org19. And then what I've done is I've used WinRAR to extract the folders from Betfair into this structure. So now we've got basic 2019 org, and we've actually got more days than what we said here for some reason. But in the 10th, we can see we've got a folder here for every single game that was played on that day. It's impossible to know here which games they relate to. And if we go into the folder, then we can see the markets here, which again, I've got, there's no indication here as to what these files are. And if we were to open this folder with something like Notepad, then again, it would contain gibberish because it's encoded. So at this point we can get our first look at our application. We'll go through all of the functions as we go along. The first one we need is to decode files and rename. By clicking this, we can navigate through our folder structure to find the files which we've just downloaded, and we can select the dates that we're interested in, so the 10th of August in this instance, and then we just let the software do its stuff, so we can see the progress bar here. Once that is completed, then we'll go back and check our file system. Okay, so that's done. And now if we look at the 10th, then we can see that all the numbers that were there before have now been changed to display folders for the actual fixtures. So if we go into Cardiff versus Luton, for example, we can see now we've actually got more descriptive descriptions here as to what the market is. And we can open that with something like Notepad and just bring this across. Then, even though it's still doesn't make a lot of sense to the human eye, it is now readable, whereas it was all gobbledygook before. And that's something that the software can now understand and work with. So now we have the games decoded. We've picked a high-profile game from the English Premier League, Ipswich versus Southampton, on February the 1st this year. Goals in this game went 0-1 in 21 minutes, 1-1 in 31, and 1-2 in 87. So what we can see are the odds for the home team, the draw, and the away team. And we get these for each minute of the game, including half-time. An update from the previous version now lets us quickly see the highest and lowest odds for each selection. So the lowest Ipswich was 1.96 in the 4th minute, and the draw was at its lowest just before the final whistle, and Southampton were at their highest also just before the final whistle. But as we know, there was an 87th minute goal for Southampton, which then brought their odds back in. So at 21 minutes, we can see that Ipswich went from 2.1 to 3.75 as Southampton took the lead. Southampton moved from 4.4 into 2.12. And also, interestingly, the draw hasn't really changed much, just by 0.3. And so at 31 minutes, when Ipswich equalised, we can see they came in from 4 to 2.22. Southampton have gone back out from 2.14 to 4.4. And again, the draw hasn't drastically changed. Finally, if we come down to the 87th minute, which is where we were earlier, then we can see that Ipswich went out from 4.6 to 55, and the draw went out to 4.7, and Southampton came in significantly to 1.3. There was a bit of noise around 4:45 minutes here, so I'm guessing the goal went in, and the odds were adjusting at that point and then settled into the pattern towards the end of the game. And we can see the highest odds for Ipswich were 1,000 right at the end, and the highest for the draw was 126. Southampton were at their lowest in the final minute at 1.04. So the middle section of the screen allows us to model different scenarios, a bit like a simulator typically would do. This section probably needs a little bit more work on it to allow betting on multiples and giving you an overall position. But as I say, it's a tool that I use for myself, and at the moment I don't see the need to do that. So what we'll do is we'll lay Ipswich at kick-off with a view to cashing out when they go a goal behind, which we know they do in the 21st minute. So at the start they were 1.98, and again we're using the back odds here because we don't have lay odds in the system, which we'll talk about later on in the video. And if we put £5 on with 2% commission as a lay bet, and then in the 21st minute they go out to 3.75, and that gives us a profit of £2.31 if we were to cash out at that point. We can also leg in if we didn't want to add all of our stake at once, so we'll stick £1 in for every 5 minutes. This time we'll back Southampton, so they begin at 4.4, and we will add that, and then 5 minutes later they were 4.4 again. 5 minutes later they were 4.5, and then they went back to 4.4, so the odds aren't really moving around much at this point, and finally they were 4.4 as well. So we can see we've got our £5 in at average odds of 4.42. So it's not going to make much difference if you'd have just put your £5 in at the start of the game in this instance. But then we will cash out when they take the lead. So when the odds drop to 2.12, so this is a back bet, we can see there we'd make £5.32 profit. So that's nice and easy. In fact, you can use this section without having a game loaded if you just want to play around with different odds and different models. It's perfect for that. Now, the final section on this form is the graph. It looks a bit sad at the moment. It appears like a flat line and then going sky high in the latter stages of the game. You can do some cool stuff with this graph though in the newer version of the software. So if you're interested in the opening 10 minutes for the home team, then we select home at the top and we'll take the first minute and we'll come down to the 10th and we can see the odds movement now. So 197 for the odds there, next minute 199. If we want to see how the draw moves around in the last 5 minutes of the half, again we'll select the draw and we'll come down to the 40th minute and we'll run to the 48th to allow for any injury time. And we can see the draw dropping there from 3.05 to 2.8, back out to 2.84, then back in again. If you just want to do it for the second half, all we need to do is just click in the left-hand column at the time you want it to start. So we'll start at 4.02, and there we've got the second half graph. If you wanted to start it, say at 4.36, we click into there, and then we get the graph from that moment onwards. And we can also export this data into a CSV so it can be used in Excel or Google Sheets. And it also takes the data that you've got on the screen. So if we're looking at 4.36 onwards here, then it will take all the data from 4.36 only into the CSV file. If you want to see pre-match data, all we need to do is to click on this box here and reload our data. So if we come back down to the match odds again, now we can see here the game started on the 1st of February. We've got data going back a week before here. So if you wanted to get on earlier, then you can do so. And we can also filter this graph as well to show pre-match odds. So just for that range on the 31st, so the day before the game, literally 24 hours before, we can see how the odds were moving around. So this tool gives you a total overview of the market from its conception right through to the close. First half goals was a new feature in the Sports Trading Live simulator. Guess what? We've got that. It was actually there for the first video, we just didn't show it. So this is the first half goals market for 1.5 goals for the Ipswich versus Southampton game, which we know closed at 31 minutes with the equalising goal to make the score 1-1. So we've got the data here for the overs and also for the unders. And as before, we can plot different areas on the graph. So we've got the overs there. Let's change that to the unders. And there we go. So it's all there as before. And that is standard out of the box. And that's a 1.5 first half goals. We could have over 0.5. And that obviously ended at 3.20. The last odds we recorded because at 3.21 the first goal went in. And again, there's the overs. Switch to unders, and there we go. So that's the entire market of the in-play data for this particular market. So correct score trading is something else which the simulators do, and that is quite powerful. I have to admit my version still needs a bit of work, but it's there. If we load the correct score market, we can see the interface now changes to show all of the scores available on Betfair. And if we went 1-0, 1-1, 1-2, 2-1 for example, and if we put our Dutch in stake in of say £10 with a commission of £2, then it tells us how much to place on each of the markets and what the profit would be if this trade was to run through to the end. And what the grid now shows is it just shows us the scores that we've got selected here. So if we decide we don't want 1-0 after all, we'll take that out of there. This recalculates and this grid changes to show just the scores that we've got selected. And again, if we bring another one in, the grid recalculates and then that comes down here. And we've got the same greens and reds so we can see when the highs and lows were for each of the markets. So future work on this is to get the graph to work. It doesn't work as well, if at all. That's still work in progress. And also the cash out as well. We need to do some work on the correct score cash out. Nonetheless, this is all powerful stuff, all for the grand total of free, actually. It's 100% free, as we keep emphasising. All it has taken has been my development time, which has been 2 weeks. So this is all pretty good stuff, I'm sure you'll agree. Now for something we think is a little bit special. The sport with the most money traded on Betfair, cricket. Yes, that's right. The same software works with the match odds cricket market. Here's the India versus England T20 game played on the 25th of January. If we look at the ESPN Cricinfo site, which is kind of the cricket lover's bible for anything to do with stats, we can see that India won by 2 wickets with 4 balls remaining, so it was quite a tight game. Looking at the scorecard, we can see England batted first and lost 2 quick wickets within the first 3 overs, and then they rallied for the next 3 overs before losing another wicket. What we can do is we take the graph for the first 25 minutes, so up to there, and we can see these are India's odds. So we can see that the 4s of the wickets they dropped, and then England rallied a bit, and then they lost another wicket, and they dropped, and then they started to put in another bit of a partnership, and the odds were going back up. The difficulty with this, being honest, is sports like cricket, the time isn't really as important as football. So like football, we've got to define time, say 45 minutes for 2 halves. Whereas with cricket, the game can meander along. It can take the amount of time, which I think for a T20 game, which this is an hour and a half per innings, or it could be over in, say, an hour, and depending on how the game has gone. So it's actually more tricky to actually find the spot you're looking for here. It's just kind of intuition and a little bit of guesswork, if we're being honest. I'm not a fan of T20. How about a test match? We have the full range here from every day of the South Africa versus Pakistan game played at the start of the year. So you can see we've got the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, right down to the conclusion of the match on the 6th. So you might want to profile the entire match, a particular day, a particular session, particular hour, or an even smaller segment. It's entirely up to you. All the data's here. So again, we can just select those 17 minutes, and that's what happened with the odds in that time. A favourite strategy for cricket was lay the draw at the start. I mean, these odds are sky high, so it probably wouldn't have been advisable, but if we put in the odds of 14 and a stake of 10 as a lay bet, and if we get out at the end of the first session, which would be 10:30 or thereabouts, so 10:30, odds are 18.5, and you make a grand total of £2.38 for a risk of 140. You wouldn't do it on this game because those odds are too high, but again, you can see what you would have made, and you can tell from this it's not worth doing, basically, on this game, because the risk to return is just so small. One final amazing feature to show you. Anyone for tennis? Yes, tennis match odds also work with the software. So we'll open the match odds for the Draper versus Vukic game in the recent Australian Open. It's got the draw in here. There's no odds for that, but this is using the same match odds model as the other sports. So the market does come in even though it's not used. And again, we can use the flash scores as our point of reference for this game. So this is the match. If we go point by point, so we can see straight away that Draper lost his serve in the first game of the match, and there you can see, so he started at 127, and we can just put that on there. We can see he went up to 1.53 with that loss, and they kind of stayed around those kind of odds for the next few games. If we just come down here, so the 8th game, it went back to being a level game. So we can see here the odds came into 1.33, and again we can just view that little part of the game. And then he broke serve again to win the first set, and you can see the odds here coming in at that point as well. So we can see the software perfectly shows the odds movements during these key events. Again, as with the cricket, the time is almost irrelevant because it's the actual events in the game which are dictating the odds, and that is why a point of reference like flash scores in this case and seeing what is going on helps you understand the odds movement and what effects an event can have on these odds. So again, if we were to lay Draper up, so 1.27 for a tenner this time, should we say, and then we would back him at 153 once he was broken, or cash out at that point. So you made £1.67 for 4 minutes work in that case. And then if we were to back him, say at 153 again, and then at 133 then you would make £1.47. Little snippets like this are so valuable just for improving your understanding of how key moments of games affect the odds, and also how you can profit and by what much. So that in a nutshell is what the software does. I have been asked several times if the software is for sale. The answer is no for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I would have to pay £500 to Betfair for a commercial licence. Now, I have no way of telling how many people would want to buy this to make it pay. If I was to put a price on it, it would be no more than 10% of the Excel simulator costs. More importantly, I don't have the time and inclination to support the software. I wrote it in 2 weeks over Christmas just to do what I wanted it to do. If I have paying customers, then I have to include their requirements too, and I just don't have the time. It's hard enough getting videos out on a regular basis. Since I made the initial video, Sports IQ have included something similar in their software, converting the simulator to use Betfair Historical Odds. This is great news for their customers and keeps in with what I said in a previous video about challenging your provider to give you more. It can't always be down to CGM, Better or myself to lead the way. If any Sports IQ subscribers are watching this, you might want to click the thanks button and send me a couple of quid, as you now have a new feature thanks partly to my vision. Use it and embrace it. There are still issues that can be worked on though. The basic model from Betfair doesn't include lay odds, only back, which is why you don't see us using them in our display. We could make them up to be one tick greater than the back odds, but this wouldn't be accurate, especially in low liquidity markets. To get lay odds costs money, although you do get odds data for every second. This would be useful for tennis, but not so much for football. I hope what we have demonstrated is that you can get all the data for free, and with the right skills and vision, you can model it in a way that you choose. Even if you don't have the skills, there is an online tool on the Betfair Historical Odds site which will convert all of the files into a readable CSV so you can use them in Excel or Google Sheets. This isn't as user-friendly as our app, but it works. You certainly don't need to be paying upwards of £300 for an Excel spreadsheet. That really is taking the Michael. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, as this motivates us to make more similar content. Thank you for watching.